On this Thursday night, alleged intruder. The Canadian military member armed and arrested near the homes of the Prime Minister and the Governor General. Grief grips a small Quebec community.
And it just turned like to hell.
The tragedy that killed 3 young children. And the former girlfriend of convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein charged.
Maxwell then tried to normalize sexual abuse.
The disturbing accusations against Ghislaine Maxwell. Plus, hockey and how to shut out COVID-19. When the puck drops, hopefully no one's dropping the ball.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, David Aiken.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. We begin tonight in the nation's capital where an armed man was arrested early this morning near the Prime Minister's residence. The military has confirmed the suspect is a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. A large number of police descended on the sprawling estate of Rideau Hall. That's where Justin Trudeau lives, as well as the Governor General Julie Payette. Investigators say neither Trudeau nor Payette were home at the time. Sources tell Global News the suspect was in possession of several firearms. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson is tracking this story. Mercedes, what are you hearing from your sources about this?
Well, David, the man smashed through the gates at 6:30 in the morning, as you mentioned. He was driving a truck which he had driven, according to sources from northern Manitoba, to speak to the Prime Minister. Inside that vehicle, sources say, were 3 long guns, including 2 shotguns and 1 rifle. The man's vehicle was disabled after he came through the gates. He got out of it at that point, and sources say that he had 1 long gun slung across his back and another long gun in his hands. He was confronted almost immediately by the police. They were able to contain him, and they spent essentially the next 2 hours talking him down and convincing him to surrender. They say he made it clear that he did not have a beef with the police, that the surrender was peaceful. He did not resist arrest. The RCMP, especially in this political climate, did not want to have to shoot somebody if they didn't have to, and they were able to arrest him without that kind of an incident. As you mentioned, he is a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. In particular, he's a member of the Canadian Rangers. They're a group that patrols Canada's remote north. You'd recognize them by their distinctive red sweatshirts. And he did have those military rations in his car. So that's what we know about him at this point.
And I guess the big question, Mercedes, is why. You mentioned he wanted to speak to the Prime Minister. Do we know what was it that he wanted to talk about?
Sources say that the man stated he had lost his job and was about to lose the truck that he used to crash through the gates. He was angry over the current situation with coronavirus and how the government has responded. Sources say that the man stated he wanted to tell Prime Minister Trudeau that he did not think the government was listening or doing enough to help him, and that he's frustrated with the current situation. David?
Mercedes Stephenson tonight. Thank you, Mercedes. An unthinkable Canada Day tragedy in Quebec has left 3 young children dead. Police say the kids, all under the age of 7, were among 10 people who were ejected from a tractor while riding in its front loader. It happened last night about 60 kilometers southeast of Montreal in the rural community of Notre Dame de Stanbridge. 2 adults are in critical condition while others sustained minor injuries. And the driver of the tractor has been arrested. Global's Dan Spector is at the scene. And Dan, there's heartbreak and shock across the community tonight.
This farming town woke up in a nightmare. Residents of the small community still coming to terms with what some are calling an unspeakable tragedy.
Yeah, it is this morning. It's heavy in Notre Dame.
According to the mayor of the town, it was a family gathering. Some had come from Montreal to join the festivities on this country road. Then just before 7 p.m., a deadly decision.
It was a Canada Day, probably festivity, and it just turned like to hell.
According to police, 6 children and 4 adults piled into the shovel of a front-end loader, all cramming in next to some wood logs. A 38-year-old man drove the tractor onto this road. What happened next remains unclear, but the adults and children in the shovel were suddenly thrown out.
I could see the police cars and the sirens with the sirens going by. So, you know, there's one police, then another, then an ambulance, another ambulance. So figured there was something bad.
When all was said and done, police say 3 children were dead. 3 other children were injured, but authorities say their lives are not in danger. The 4 adults were also hurt, 2 are in critical condition.
Le tracteur aurait passé dessus.
They went under the wheels of the tractor, the mayor said. The 38-year-old driver was arrested. It's not clear if any of the children killed were his own.
Horrible.
In farming communities like this, going on joyrides in the shovel of a front-end loader is not uncommon. This man says he's taken children on rides like that before.
Everybody does that in the country, but it depends on the situation they were in, too. I don't know. But I never heard of 10 people in a bucket.
The mayor is requesting psychological help be made available, as many residents here need help to deal with the emotional pain and shock. The driver is facing criminal charges. Police say alcohol may have been a factor. David.
Dan Spector near Montreal tonight. Thank you, Dan. A health unit in an Ontario community hit hard by COVID-19 has ordered a work stoppage at a farm. The move comes after 191 migrant workers tested positive for the virus over the weekend. Abigail Beeman looks at the challenges migrant workers are facing in this pandemic and what advocates say needs to change.
Farm workers can't work from home when they have hundreds of acres to tend to.
Promo video from Nature Fresh Farms in April about getting food to table during the pandemic. But after 191 migrant workers tested positive for COVID-19 over the weekend, the local health unit stopped work at a southwestern Ontario farm. They didn't name the facility, but sources tell Global News it was Nature Fresh. The farm did not respond to multiple requests from Global News.
The order is very specific to the isolation of asymptomatic and symptomatic workers and contacts, and also the contractors.
The small communities of Leamington and nearby Kingsville are the worst hit in Ontario, with dozens of farms and thousands of migrant workers, many living in close quarters.
40 people to a bunkhouse, sharing one shower. They're climbing on top of each other to go to sleep. They have 4 toilets.
The province is helping arrange hotels for workers who need to isolate, but a union rep in contact with some workers at Nature Fresh says they're afraid of being deported if they can't work and afraid of isolating in a hotel rather than a healthcare facility.
These workers are very concerned and would like to be taken care of.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford says they've sent translators to the region.
We just need the cooperation of the workers. All the workers went and hid. We were able to retest 4 out of 190. And that's why my emphasis to the workers, nothing's going to happen. We're here. Ontario's here to help you.
There are many migrants and undocumented people who are rightly scared.
This needs to be a time of working together.
In Leamington, Mary Fair's husband employs migrant workers at a greenhouse. She says the farmers she knows are doing their best.
There seems to be so much talk about the farmers being fair to the workers, and yet at the same time, the government and the healthcare system isn't being fair to them at all.
The Premier said Thursday workers who can't work will still get paid, but advocates say that's not always happening. They're pushing for more rights for workers, like the ability to join unions and access to permanent resident status. Abigail Beeman, Global News, Ottawa.
There is now a presumptive case of COVID-19 in Nunavut, which had been the only region in the country without one. An out-of-territory worker has tested positive at the Mary River Mine. That's an open-pit iron mine in the remote far north of Baffin Island. The territory's health officer says the individual is in isolation and the situation is contained. The U.S. has reached another grim benchmark in the COVID-19 pandemic. The daily number of confirmed cases has surpassed 50,000 for the first time in one day. The country is now closing in on 3 million cases. Many of them are in Florida. The state set a new daily record today, adding more than 10,000 COVID-19 cases. And with 4th of July celebrations just days away, there's concern those numbers will rise even higher. Jackson Prosco reports.
Like a runaway train, there seems to be no stopping the pandemic in the U.S., with daily records for new infections shattered in Florida and Arizona, and with cases now on the rise in at least 40 states.
Unlike it was before, where it was localized to one area, we're now seeing many major metropolitan areas that could be facing the situation of overwhelming our healthcare capacity.
It's not just the result of reopening bars and restaurants, it's the disregard for any public health advice. In Alabama, groups of teens were caught holding coronavirus parties to purposely spread the virus, with cash prizes as an incentive for getting sick.
First, I couldn't believe believe it, that these kids are having parties and they're putting money in a pot and they're purposely trying to get COVID from the person who has COVID, and apparently whoever gets COVID first gets the pot.
As bad as things are now, experts say they're going to get worse. Hospitals are already overwhelmed in parts of Arizona, Texas, and California. Deaths and hospitalizations lag weeks behind initial infections.
Patients first have to get sick, then they have to get very sick, and unfortunately, then they succumb.
And the crisis is being handled.
But President Donald Trump is projecting an entirely different message, claiming the virus is under control.
We have some areas where we're putting out the flames or the fires, and that's working out well.
On Wednesday, Trump went so far as to suggest that COVID-19 would simply vanish.
I think that at some point that's going to sort of just disappear, I hope.
Instead, it keeps popping up in new places. Less than 2 weeks after masks and social distancing were shunned at Trump's Tulsa, Oklahoma rally, former presidential candidate Herman Cain, who was in the crowd, is now hospitalized with COVID-19, though it's not clear where he contracted the virus. On Friday, Trump will visit Mount Rushmore ahead of Independence Day. And despite the nationwide surge in cases, the governor of South Dakota has made a point of advertising the fact that masks will not be required and social distancing will not be practiced at the event. David?
Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thank you, Jackson. Now to a major development in the fight over the Trans Mountain Pipeline Expansion Project. Canada's top court has ruled against a group of First Nations who have been trying to stop the project from going ahead. Today, the Supreme Court dismissed a new appeal from 3 BC First Nations, effectively exhausting all options that could end their year-long legal battle over the project. It is the second time an appeal has been rejected after the Court of Appeal ruled in February that the project would still go ahead, this time saying the government made a genuine effort to consult Indigenous communities and hear their concerns.
With heavy hearts, we are here. But we know by far this is not over. We have a lot more work to do. We're mandated by our people to make sure that this is not going to be built. And that's what we believe. It's not going to be built.
It has been a long and bumpy road for the project after Kinder Morgan backed out and Ottawa stepped in, purchasing the project for $4.5 billion to keep it alive. Today, the Supreme Court did not release any reason for its decision. Dozens of homes have been evacuated in southern Manitoba, where severe flooding is threatening to burst an old dam. The situation surrounding Brandon is so bad, authorities are calling it a 1-in-1,000-year event. The Little Saskatchewan River is raging after a record-breaking storm earlier this week. Officials fear a 60-year-old dam in the area could fail, and that could put several communities in danger. Crews are racing to build a temporary dike. Disaster in Myanmar. Coming up, the powerful landslide that pummeled into a group of miners. It was in March when the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. Since then, the virus has spread to almost every country on Earth, and it shows no signs of slowing down. The WHO says more than half the world's infections were recorded in June alone. Worldwide confirmed cases are expected to reach the 11 million mark as early as tomorrow. Crystal Gumansing has a look at how we got here and where we may be headed.
From India to Brazil to the United States, COVID-19 infections are surging. Efforts are underway to get a handle on the dangerous trend.
We are identifying if anyone is suspected case over here or not. So that is what we are doing. So we are checking their temperature, their oxygen capacity with our thermal gun and our oximeter.
The World Health Organization says the spread of the virus is accelerating globally. It's renewing its warning to test, track, and isolate cases. The virus has extended its tentacles to every corner of the world. Members of Brazil's military this week sent masks to indigenous people deep in the Amazon. Everyone, everywhere is at risk.
This is not a failure of biology. It's not a failure of epidemiology or science. It's a failure of leadership. In countries where we are seeing these kinds of increases.
There have been examples of countries successfully flattening the curve. Dr. Saad Omer says it proves it's possible, but he and many others are worried about what's still to come. Just take a look how fast the virus has spread in just a few months. In April, infections hit the 1 million mark. In May, that number jumped to 5 million. And then at the end of June, infections surpassed 10 million.
There's no use having a toolbox if your handyman is not willing to use it.
Tools such as testing and tracking, masks, physical distancing, and hand washing. Effective measures that the experts have been pushing for months. Crystal Gamansing, Global News, London.
Just ahead, Ghislaine Maxwell arrested, a key figure in Jeffrey Epstein's history of abuse. Global National returns in a moment from Ottawa.
You're watching Global National.
At least 162 people are reported dead after a landslide buried workers at a jade mine in Myanmar. Miners were collecting stones at the site when a pile of mining waste began to slide into a lake. Authorities warn the number of dead is expected to rise as they clear away the muddy debris. In Brazil, raging wildfires in the Amazon rainforest are threatening the lives of dozens of indigenous tribes. Fires in the region rose by almost 20% in June. That's compared to June last year, and that is a 13-year monthly high. There's concern this year's fires could surpass the devastation caused in 2019. Many forest fires in the Amazon are started deliberately by illegal loggers and farmers wanting to quickly clear land. There's been a major development in the case of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. His ex-girlfriend and longtime confidant, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been charged in connection with his alleged sex trafficking operation.
Today, we announced charges against Ghislaine Maxwell for helping Jeffrey Epstein sexually exploit and abuse multiple minor girls.
An unsealed federal indictment accuses Maxwell of helping Epstein, who was friends of both princes and presidents, to recruit, groom, and exploit women and girls, one as young as 14. That happened between 1994 and 1997. Federal attorneys say Epstein and Maxwell worked together to make alleged victims feel at ease and to lure them in.
Maxwell enticed minor girls, got them to trust her, then delivered them into the trap that she and Epstein had set for them. She pretended to be a woman they could trust. All the while, she was setting them up to be sexually abused by Epstein and, in some cases, by Maxwell herself.
The charges against Maxwell were filed nearly 1 year after Epstein was charged with sexually exploiting and abusing dozens of underage girls. Epstein died in jail in August last year while awaiting trial, and his death was determined to be a suicide. Facing off against COVID-19 next, the side effects of the NHL's comeback. Most of you are missing your sports, especially hockey fans, but it looks like the NHL is coming back to Canada, at least to Toronto and Edmonton, as the league tries to salvage the Stanley Cup playoffs. While nothing is set in stone, as Eric Sorensen explains, if it happens, the big challenge will be keeping COVID-19 off the ice.
On the bleak COVID-19 landscape, hockey in the dead of summer is a bright spot for Canadian fans and the game they love.
Great. I think it's perfect. It's what we need. We need something to boost us up.
Toronto's a big city. I think it'd be cool if they came to Toronto.
Toronto and Edmonton as host cities would each welcome several hundred players and team officials. It wasn't Plan A for the NHL, which looked at Las Vegas as one hub to spur American interest. It sends a blunt message to Washington, which has downplayed the virus, that it is spreading in the U.S. and Canada is safer.
I mean, the NHL really is a New York, U.S.-driven league now.
This sports marketing expert says it's a feather in the cap for Canada.
A lot of Canadians have sacrificed an awful lot right now for COVID and for these good numbers that we have. So it's great that we perhaps are getting a bit of reward.
If the NHL can get hockey started without a COVID-19 disruption, then an expanded 24-team playoff would put every Canadian team on the ice except Ottawa. Now, it may not be home ice advantage with fans filling the seats in the usual way, but in Toronto, the Maple Leafs will be at home, and the Montreal Canadiens will be here, along with 10 American teams from the Eastern Conference. In Edmonton, it's an embarrassment of riches. 4 Canadian teams. The Oilers would be playing at home, the Vancouver Canucks would be playing there, and the Calgary Flames and the Winnipeg Jets would meet each other in the first round. The challenge for the NHL, create a bubble around teams to keep the virus out.
You extend that bubble to all their transportation and all of those other logistics. Logistically difficult and expensive, but certainly doable. And I think people need their sports.
It'll be tricky. More than 24 NHLers have tested positive for COVID-19. And the Canucks' Jake Virtanen is under fire after being spotted mixing with people in a Vancouver nightclub.
It's going to be the commitment of the players, and it's going to be really almost a security and vigilance on behalf of the NHL staff.
Some fans seem prepared to accept the risk of NHLers bringing the virus to town.
As long as they're taking some precaution, like I'm fine.
They're just looking forward to hockey.
Travel.
The Stanley Cup playoffs could start in about a month. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Thursday. I'm David Aiken. Tonight's Your Canada is Enderby, British Columbia. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching. I'll see you back here from the nation's capital tomorrow. Good night.